How does an industrial system insulate its primary beneficiary from catastrophic operational failures? This level of wealth was the product of an engineered structure of impunity, where proxy enforcement shielded the executive from the consequences of his own financial mandates. Carnegie developed his understanding of power within the Pennsylvania Railroad. Under mentor Tom Scott, he learned that whoever controls the infrastructure controls the entire industry. He applied these railroad logistics to steel production, building an operation that held a multi-decade lead over any potential challengers. This technological advantage centered on the Bessemer process, which drastically cut the time and expense of producing high-grade steel. This high-speed manufacturing capability allowed Carnegie to supply the massive quantities of steel required for the expansion of American railroads and skyscrapers. While the Bessemer process provided a technical advantage, it created a rigid, constant demand for raw materials, a requirement Carnegie failed to secure. Carnegie's model relied on the assumption that iron ore would always remain cheap and accessible on the open market. John D. Rockefeller identified this blind spot and moved to seize control of the steel industry's primary supply chain. Rockefeller's team acquired the Mesabi mountain range in Minnesota, capturing a 120-mile-long vein of high-quality iron ore. Rockefeller weaponized this supply by selling the ore to Carnegie's competitors at artificially low prices, while threatening to build his own steel mills to bypass Carnegie entirely. Carnegie's technical lead at the plant was neutralized by Rockefeller's control of the raw material bottleneck, forcing Carnegie into a desperate systemic crisis. To end a conflict that threatened to erode their respective market controls, Carnegie and Rockefeller entered a private negotiation. This diagram shows the terms they established. Carnegie agreed to a mandatory annual purchase of 600,000 tons of iron ore from Rockefeller. Furthermore, the deal required Carnegie to ship his finished steel exclusively through Rockefeller's rail networks. The arrangement was secured by a secret, illegal financial rebate paid to Carnegie, while Rockefeller agreed to stay out of steel manufacturing. This pact replaced market competition with a calculated, anti-competitive duopoly that rigged the national steel market in their favor. The Rockefeller deal locked Carnegie into massive, fixed annual expenditures that he had to pay regardless of how the steel market was performing. To maintain his profit margins under the weight of these rigid supply costs, Carnegie aggressively reduced his internal operational expenses. This bar chart shows the resulting pressure. As the rigid costs for Rockefeller's ore and rail lines remained high, Carnegie chose to systematically slash labor wages to balance the ledger. The financial pressure generated in the boardroom was transferred directly to the factory floor, making a physical confrontation with the workforce a near certainty. The Homestead Strike of 1892 broke out when the financial strain of Carnegie's secret deal finally reached the mill gates in the form of deep wage cuts. Carnegie utilized a principal-agent strategy, leaving the country and distancing himself from the enforcement of these cuts to avoid public and legal fallout. He delegated the brutal task of breaking the union to his chairman, Henry Clay Frick. Frick deployed a private army to reclaim the plant, leading to a violent battle with the strikers and multiple deaths. This was the functional design of the Carnegie system. The executive extracts the profit from severe cost-cutting while delegating the moral and legal liability for physical violence to a proxy. The conflict proved that the Carnegie-Rockefeller supply chain was too dominant for the market to keep separate. J.P. Morgan stepped in to consolidate Carnegie's manufacturing efficiency with Rockefeller's iron ore monopoly. The resulting corporation, U.S. Steel, absorbed Carnegie's entire operation. The buyout was valued so high that it created the first corporation in history with a $1 billion market capitalization. Morgan wasn't just eyeing factories. He was purchasing a fully insulated, anti-competitive engine built on depressed wages and illegal rebates. Carnegie's empire began with technical innovation, but was nearly destroyed by a failure to secure its own resources. He stabilized his business through illegal, closed-door agreements that removed the risks of a free market. He then offloaded the financial costs of those deals onto his workers, using a proxy to manage the resulting violence. This process translated localized tragedy into massive personal wealth, allowing Carnegie to retire with his fortune and reputation largely intact. When a corporate structure is designed to reward the evasion of liability, how can the system's architects ever be held responsible for the consequences?